Today we're talking about the next release into Smite after Daji, and that is Cu Chulainn. Sorry if I butchered this pronunciation, it is really hard to say. For the rest of this video I will just call him Cu, because that makes it a little easier. Interestingly enough, despite not having more information about Daji, we already have access to Cu's full kit at this point. We can expect some changes to this down the road, but generally there seems to be a very clear direction in what kind of character he's going to be. As always, thanks to Smite Data Mining for providing us with this information and allowing me to use it. So, what do we know about Cu? Lore-wise, he was known to convert himself into Rage, a Berserker or War mode with more strength. Some say he converted into a monster, but seeing from the direction that Harris is taking here, we are probably gonna see more of that Berserk mode. If we look at the description of the abilities and consider the fact that Daji is 99% certainly an assassin, we are very likely to see Cu being a warrior. This is down to the fact that his abilities are physical, so he can't be a guardian, and they very much revolve around being in the middle of a fight and getting his combos off, so to speak. Theoretically, he could be an assassin. I'm very sure he's not going to be a hunter, but I would put my money on him being a warrior. Cu introduces a new mechanic into Smite, revolving around that particular rage that we talked about, and this mechanic is also his passive. So, this passive is, instead of using mana, Cu has Ferocity, which is capped at 100. He may not regen more than 30. He gains Ferocity upon hitting with his basic attacks and abilities, as well as upon he or his allies taking damage. If Cu remains above 75 Ferocity for more than 3 seconds, he goes Berserk. While in Berserk, Cu's ultimate is replaced with a War Yell, and his basic attack chain is altered to include an AOE Ground Pound and a Knockback as his 3rd and 6th hit respectively. He also gains movement speed and maximum health, healed to match the percentage of current maximum health. So that means that if he is on lower health and he gets that extra health to his maximum health, he will still receive some sort of healing to match that percentage of the maximum health. That is actually already a whole lot of information to take in. If he uses this Ferocity, he doesn't use mana, so he doesn't make use of MP5, he doesn't make use of any mana items, and that really restricts him in the items he can get, or kinda makes them different at least. It's especially important to note that most cooldown reduction items come with some sort of mana benefit, so he may benefit less from those overall, whereas there seems to be quite a fair bit of benefit in getting extra attack speed, not only for gaining his Ferocity, but also other things like these extra beneficial hits in his hit chain being the Ground Pound and the Knockback. We don't know much about this War Yell yet, aside of the fact that it activates after 75 Ferocity, so we'll see what exactly that means. That brings us to his first skill, Barbed Spear. Cu thrusts his spear forward, damaging all enemies in front of him. The damage goes from 90 base to 270 with 55% scaling physical power. The cost here is from 50 to 90, though I'm not quite sure if these values are correct, because in the end he's supposed to gain Ferocity upon using abilities, and I doubt that 90 is an appropriate value here. I feel like he was originally supposed to have mana and then they went with the Ferocity instead, and those values are not really adjusted yet. Because if he could get 90 Ferocity in one ability, he could activate his passive basically in one single ability every time he uses it, and that doesn't seem quite right. I feel like the cost values are just not adjusted across all of the abilities yet, and we'll see that a little bit later down the kit as well. The cooldown of the ability is supposed to be 10 seconds. The second ability is Vent Steam. Cu vents his anger as superheated steam, increasing his movement speed and draining his Ferocity. Every 0.5 seconds while in this state, all enemies within 22.5 units are damaged by the heat. This damage increases by 5% for each consecutive hit they take, up to a maximum of 3, but resets upon Cu taking damage. The ability damage starts at 20 and goes up to 40, plus 5% scaling, and it's physical damage. So while this has some resemblance to Mystical Mail, it also works a little bit differently. Being physical damage with scaling, you can actually get higher damage against targets with low protection if you have a lot of penetration, but at the same time it doesn't work as well when they have high physical protection, obviously. Also, what's a little bit odd here is that the damage is per second, whereas the tick is every 0.5 seconds, so I'm not quite sure which one will apply here, if this is just calculated up for the second, or the description here is a little bit off. The movement speed increase, however, will be 20%. This is across all ranks, meaning it gives you a little bit of extra chase potential. It's actually not too bad. 20% is a quite solid increase for himself. And the cost is currently still unknown. It's gonna be a cost every 0.5 seconds, so for every tick, but how much it is, we don't know yet. So it will slowly drain your ferocity over time, and that means you can't just activate it at all times. It's probably gonna last longer if you're able to stick to a target and constantly hit them as well. The cooldown of this ability is only 2 seconds, so it seems to function a little more like a toggle ability, and the main purpose here is to use it whenever you have the spare ferocity to do so. What you have to keep in mind is that draining ferocity will keep you from going into Berserk, so it might not be that ideal to use it in many situations. The third skill is Salmon Sleep. Cu vaults over his spear, leaping to a target location and slamming it down to damage enemies around and in front of him. So it seems to be some sort of circle radius leap with a range of 35. The damage starts at 70, goes up to 310, which is quite a lot. It's actually more than his 1. And up to 60% physical power scaling. The cost goes up from 60 to 80. Once again, I believe this is probably just an old mana value. It doesn't really tell us all too much. And the cooldown here is 14 seconds. When it comes to his ultimate, I have no idea how to pronounce it. Probably something like a Guy Bulk. We will assume that the casters will sooner or later call it Gay Bulge. And this ability is gonna have a radius of 30. Cu swings his spear in a circle around him, damaging and knocking up all enemies. The damage starts at a flat value of 100 and goes up to 500 plus 65% scaling. While it isn't mentioned in the description, it seems to slow enemies as well, or this is an old or new passive of it, which is a 30% slow for 2 seconds. The cost is 100. Once again, I assume this is an old value, because otherwise you would have to be at the max stacks to even use this when you're looking at the ferocity, and that would mean that your ultimate would already be transformed into the other way that it works, or it would get you to max ferocity right away, which both doesn't sound really logical to me, so I will just assume that there's an old value, and the cooldown is 75 seconds. Overall, I do think these are some very interesting mechanics. I'm curious how much of it will actually make it into the game, because I feel like there may be some shifts into what's effective and what not. But in the end, it seems to be a very interesting and solid kit, and I'm looking forward to seeing it in game. If you're watching this video relatively shortly after it came out, I wanted to quickly let you know that you can also vote for the Willish skin at the moment. I will drop the link down in the description. There are 3 skins to choose from. If you want to know what I voted for, it is Immaculate Moonlight. I do think Midnight Dove was also pretty cool, but unfortunately the Suku doesn't work as well with those front legs with the original model that they seem to prefer over a changed model, just, you know, to keep it a little more simple. And I think Immaculate Moonlight has a little cool animations. That's just my opinion, just letting you know, because I know some of you are interested in my vote. With that, thank you guys for watching. If you are not subscribed yet, I would very much appreciate if you click the subscribe button and maybe the bell. It really helps me out. See you for the next one tomorrow. Duke Sloth, out.